Part 2 of today's event will now resume with a very special presentation entitled Malaysia's Future Education from the Perspective of Digital Generation, to be presented by Mr. Muhammad Fikri Ahmad, the recipient of National Best Student Award 2014, awarded by the Ministry of Education Malaysia. Please put your hands together for none other than Mr. Muhammad Fikri Ahmad. The sharp and handsome Mr. Fikri.
Mega berarak indah berbalam, terbang seiring di tepi kali. Pemanis kalam, selamat pagi, awal bismillah, pembuka bicara. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and very good morning. First, I would like to thank to the Master of Ceremony, esteemed guests, lecturers, doctors, and ladies and gentlemen. Indeed, I'm really grateful for being able to be here to represent my generation on how do we perceive the future education should be. I also owe my thanks to the CEO of Human Life Advanced Foundation for calling me to share my thought on how do we perceive the future education should be. In fact, it is very rare nowadays for the baby boomers generation, as most of you in this hall, who will wish to listen from my generation on how do we perceive the future education should be. For that, I again thanks on behalf of my generation. Before I begin on the expectation or on how do we perceive the future education should be, I think it will be better for me to share a bit of the characteristic of our generation. Though I know it is quite familiar because your children is the Gen Z generation. So ladies and gentlemen, the first one is these digital generations are the one who born basically between 1995 to the recent years. And second, they are very or over-reliant to the gadget itself. They even learn how to switch on an iPad before they can barely walk. And this is a reality today. And because of that, we tend to be very individualistic in nature. We tend to do work on our own because we couldn't care less what happened outside there. It is of us and the gadget itself. Or it can be in terms of phones, tablets, and whatnot. And because of these ways of communication, we have less of human touch or human interaction within us. Because most of the time we spend will be with this gadget. And in fact, we are more than happy to receive news of holiday due to his via Facebook rather than physical poster. So this is among the characteristics that we possess as of our generation. And last but not least, we love something which is instant. That's why we have a lot of instant Maggie and whatnot. And we fail to appreciate the process in making or in coming to the result. And it is clearly can be seen when we hit red tape and also bureaucracy. And we can see the changes when there are many startups existent within or surround us. And that is why the need to transform the education that we have as of now is utmost important, because what we are having at the moment will only serve those generation before us. I would like to quote a statement mentioned by Bill Gates in National Education Summit in 2005 back then, whereby he mentioned, our high schools were designed 50 years ago to meet the needs of another age. Until we design them to meet the needs of the 21st century children, we will keep limiting even running the life of millions of children every year. So by understanding this statement, I think it is clearly mentioned that there is a need to reform based on today's generation's needs. And by that, I would like to share three main important things which is crucial to us, the Generation Z, for us to understand education better. So the first one, we believe that the education that we have now should transform, or the education that should the Generation Z learning will be the one who inculcate the culture of akhlaq and adab. Because as I mentioned earlier, when we have too many times spending and focusing on the gadget itself, we have less time learning on how to be, to practice a better akhlaq, or to have a strong character building within us. In fact, as what mentioned by Imam Ghazali in the book of Ihya Ulumuddin, he mentioned the highest level of educated person is the one who has the finest adab or akhlaq. And I think that is the best things that we can look forward by inculcating these values within us. So the next question arise will be, what is the finest adab or akhlaq that we can inculcate as of Malaysian context? So I would like to suggest, first of course, to look after the universal values such as integrity, professionalism and whatnot. And second is to look into Malaysian principle, or we call as Rukun Negara, the five Rukun Negara that all children embrace it during every assembly, every day. Because at the end of the day, what we are producing, and we hope that our generation will have the ummatic vision and not to embrace the individualism, idealism, the individualistic nature, but rather to see the ummatic needs first before we fulfill ours. And as Malay proverbs rhythm, padang ilalang di sebelah kuda, di atas punggung duduk si kadi. Meski menjulang ilmu di dada, tetap menunduk bersama budi. And that is why I think it is our most concern that akhlaq should be one of the things that to be embedded within the system. Second, on how we perceive future education should be is to promote lifelong learning process, because we tend to be very bored easily. So in doing so, I do really hope that the future education will offer the next generation in terms of experiential learning. It should no longer be on textbook basis, but rather on experiential learning basis. So what is the best method that we can learn from? I would suggest to the audience to use the gaming method, because somehow games have give the Generation Z the ability to learn by observing and doing the things on hand. It's called onboarding and involve the use of videos and interactive example that will initiate response from the students. So by doing that and by using that, I believe it can attract the Gen Z to learn better. And instead of, for instance, instead of memorizing what is the date of World War II, I think it would be better if we can somehow innovate by providing an environment whereby the students can be within the battlefield itself, so that they can appreciate the history better. So it might sound quite difficult, but I believe if we can break it down to pieces and we outline the values, we can reach the objective. And last but not least, the third values, or the third things that I look forward for my generation will be an education which are accessible to anyone, anywhere, and anytime. Why do I bring this motion up? Simply because as we move on, the education seems to be quite expensive in nature. It is up to the elitists, for instance. Maybe it's free for primary and secondary, but when it comes to tertiary education, it tends to hike up on costs. So that is why, in fact, I have listed a few initiatives made by Human Life Advanced Foundation, whereby they have the same ideology in bringing education free for all. For that, let us put our hand together for the foundation.